Now, he is a black or African American author, and what he has in this for children, because he's actually a teacher from kindergarten to fifth grade. Yes, sir. And this book is specifically designed, and it has letters, and it talks about basically the pride that we need to have. So, example, A is love is affection, love is brave, and there are phenomenal illustrations in here. Love is caring, love is dedication. So if you give this to your child and they're reading this, it's all about the positiveness of the spirit. And that gentleman is in the back over there. That's the author. Oh, wow. Mr. Kirsten Potter. The book is $10. I know he would greatly appreciate it if you support him. He came all the way from St. Louis, Missouri. Wow. So this project, you know, education is important, is everything. So now we're about to get to the second half of the QR codes that I told you about. They're in the back. Did you see them by the food? The little placards? Wait, let me take 1 second so you can see this. Okay, sorry to hold it up, but hold it high. These are QR codes. Now you're going to see them on television sometimes, social media, so on and so forth. Instead of having to write out a whole email address and so on, you just take your phone and you hold it to it, and a link will come up. You just click and it'll take you right there, right through your phone. So it makes your life a lot easier because there's a whole lot of hashtags, all this other kind of stuff is up there. So please make sure you scan these, because this, remember we said the information online? This is it. Everything you saw today will be online on this particular QR code. All the bios, all the information will be there. So we want to make sure that you understand. Make sure you hit this before you leave, and you'll actually see it click and register before you leave, so there's no waiting. Okay, at this point, I'll turn it over to my partner, Mr. John Marshall Lee.
So there's a future for you in selling on television. For $19.99, today only.
Yeah, so
You too.
Thank you.
You too can have a QR code. Okay, I got it.
Panel 3, the Economic Democracy Act. And speaking on it, presenters are Michael Grady, whom you've heard from before, Gene Gordon, and the presenter, Dawn Brohan. And I don't know, precedents and models for the Economic Democracy Act. I'm going to let them, since we're back on time schedule, and I don't have to ring the bell for this group. And then the final, you can break anytime you wish, if you need to. But I want to get into the fourth panel, Building a Better Future for Every Person, with Dr. Aka, Dr. Uma, and Dr. Felix Onyeze. And finally, even Norman gets back in the act. A bold vision of the future work. And where do we go from here? With your help. So here we are with the third session. And Dawn, are you leading the way? Mike, okay, good. I think there are some cookies left in the back if you have a dessert. Yeah.
And the rights of property should be available to all in a meaningful way. I mean, it's one thing to say everybody has the right to be an owner. It's quite another to make that a reality. To say that everyone not only can be an owner, but really is, and that ownership is meaningful. Because as all of you have been to law school, title doesn't necessarily make you the owner. Just because the law says you own it, if you do not control it, and if you do not enjoy the fruits of it, you're not really the owner, even though a piece of paper may say you.
That's true.
Now, early in this country, on June 12, 1776, a man named George Mason of Gunston Hall, Virginia, was the original drafter of something called the Virginia Declaration of Rights that some scurrilous individual named Thomas Jefferson plagiarized. And he said, I'll paraphrase it because I don't have the exact quote, every single human being has the right to life, liberty, and access to the means of acquiring and possessing property and enjoying happiness and safety. Sounds a little bit familiar, doesn't it? Well, when you look at the Declaration of Independence, there was a slight omission. First of all, because the conservatives in the Virginia Convention got really outraged when they said something about, you mean every person? What about these slaves we own? Okay, so over Mason's protests, and believe it or not, he was a slave owner who hated slavery. Everything he wrote, he stuck in some condemnation of slavery, even though he owned them. And over his protests, they said, when they enter into a state of society, they have rights. No, that doesn't do. Every single human being, whether or not you're in society or outside of it. Okay, now, leaping forward another 87 years, we have the Homestead Act of 1862, which John mentioned a little bit earlier. It was considered the greatest economic initiative in history. I mean, the world has never seen an explosion of economic growth as the United States experienced from the end of the Civil War to the 1890s. A period of less than 30 years, and you saw a nation go from pretty much a backward country to an industrial and commercial and agricultural powerhouse. Now, one of the great things about the Homestead Act was it overthrew King Cotton. Now, from 1803 until 1937, cotton was the single largest export from the United States. I mean, cotton was king. If you know anything about woolen history, or clothing history, or anything else like this, all you fashion designers, cloth was expensive. What made it cheap was the cotton cheap. But it also justified slavery. Because where are you going to get this cheap labor to work in the fields to supply the massive amounts of cotton that the cotton gin required? Prior to the cotton gin, it took a slave half a day to pick the seeds out of a pound of cotton. When the cotton gin, after the cotton gin was invented, 3 slaves could process tons of cotton a day. And you wonder why they kept pushing for expansion of slavery and more land, more. We need it. Oh, because there's money in it. And in my opinion, the book that caused the Civil War was not Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin. That was important. But the real cause was a book that you probably never heard of called Cotton is King. David Christie, a former abolitionist who justified slavery on the grounds that the economic survival of the United States and the British Empire depended on slave cultivation of cotton, which was horrible. Now, the Homestead Act of 1862 was, as I said, a great economic initiative, but it had certain flaws, which we've already addressed. It affected only a limited asset, land. Once you've given away all the land, where are you going to get some more? It took land from other people. I mean, in most cases. Some places the land was not owned, but in most cases, somebody else had a claim to it. Ayn Rand, like an idiot, said that, oh, well, the Native Americans didn't deserve it because they weren't making proper use of it. By whose opinion? I mean, come on. I promise not to preach. The one thing that my mother would have agreed with, being raised on a farm, is not everybody can farm or wants to. Trust me. I learned some pretty foul language from my mother, and all I had to do with farming. Now, if the Homestead Act did not, address commercial or industrial capital, just landed capital. Now, in Article 17 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of the United Nations, as Dr. Curlin earlier mentioned, it recognizes that everyone has the right to own, and no one shall be arbitrarily deprived of property. But it doesn't say anything about how you get it in the first place. Now, Louis Kelso invented a way that people could do it. A lot of people think that he first invented the Aesop and then came up with a way to justify it. No. He first came up with the justification or the reasoning why everyone should be an owner. And he started thinking about this during the Depression when he saw hobos jumping off of trains hunting for work. Please give me work. Well, Why should you be hunting for work when you can own capital when machines are doing all the work? And so he came up with something to apply his principles called the employee stock ownership. And the first one was implemented in 1956 in Monterey, California. And the good thing about law in the United States is if it doesn't say you can't do it, you can't. A lot of other countries, you can't do it unless they give you explicit permission to do so. But the ESOP could be implemented even though the law said nothing about it. In fact, because the law said nothing about it. Now, jumping forward again, in 1973, it got enacted into law with the help of Senator Russell Long, who is the son of Huey Long, the kingfish. You remember him. Now, in 86? Yeah. CESJ had its first big production, the Presidential Task Force on Project Economic Justice. It was a bipartisan commission, and everybody got together and agreed that expanded ownership should be a primary thrust of every government. And this was endorsed by President Reagan. He even gave a speech. I recall, and this was before I was associated with CESJ, but I remember it being reported on the television, and the only thing they talked about was the cancerous growth Reagan had removed on his nose, and he met with a bunch of businessmen. Okay. A copy of this was given to His Holiness Pope John Paul II, and also to other, and copies were distributed all over the world. USAID said that it should be, policy of USAID throughout the world. And a for-profit that we're associated with, Equity Expansion International, did what is considered one of the best employee ownership models in Egypt, in Africa itself, called the Alexandria Tire Company, which is the whole sordid story, we won't get into it. Now, getting closer to home, and what will be spoken of in just a moment, East St. Louis, which is in Illinois, not Missouri, the Citizens Land Development Cooperative. This was passed by Y. Vetter Young, who is the leading House Democrat, I think, in the Illinois legislature. And it didn't get past the Senate. Some fellow named, what name names? This was the model for what Gene Gordon helped put through in St. Louis, Missouri, not East St. Louis, Illinois, the other side of the river. The St. Louis CLDC and the Missouri EDA, Economic Democracy Act resolution that did pass, and was the basis of what Senator May was talking about earlier. But the whole emphasis of the whole reason for the Economic Democracy Act is our slogan is you either own or you are own or be owned. Amen.
Michael, I need to break into you for a minute. Yes. You're finished. Man, great time to break in. God bless. Okay. But we're going to invite, I'm going to invite applause for Senator May, who has traveled a long day, not much sleep last night, and heading back to Missouri. So she's got to catch a plane. And Gene Gordon is going to help her get there. So let's give a hand to her leadership. God bless you. And make your way to the door, please.
Yes, Black Girl Magic.
God bless you, okay? And wish us well. Keep us in your prayers, okay? All right.
All right. Senator Carla May from Missouri.
Now, we have. I don't know where. Wayne, is there a problem with Dawn figuring out the second part now that we?
Well,
because they're in the fourth session.
okay, well, I'm saying Gene, for his segment, asked Dr. Aka to come up, so, and then you guys can continue on.
So, Dr. Aka, who has not been suitably introduced. Would you introduce yourself, please? Ah, wonderful, Dr. Singh. Thank you. Having the second part of the third session. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And we appreciate your presence here. My name again is Dr. Woma. I'm the chairman of Republic of Biafra Government in Exile, that is in Oxon Hill, Maryland, which is vicinity of Washington, D.C. I have Professor Aka, Philip Aka. He is going to be speaking on our behalf. And of course, after that, you can ask questions, comments on anything that you want to know. Professor Aka is an author. He's a professor, of course, a retired professor from University of Chicago State University. And he has written many books. All you have to do is just Google Philip Aka, and you'll get to him. He's also, of course, a Biafran human rights activist. And so, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Professor Aka to talk to us.
I have some PowerPoint slides. Yeah. Give me a moment.
Norman, I read a book and left it with him in Arlington, which he's read, about civil rights and the way military operates. And Diane Nash said something that resonated with Senator Moore. She said, "I gained a great respect for truth, not because it has anything to do with being good or right or anything, but it is being in touch with reality." Does that make sense to you? I've gained a respect for truth, not because it has anything to do with being good or right or anything, but it's being in touch with reality. We've had too many recent years where we've been out of touch with reality.
Exactly.
The stories being told.
Yep.
And the experience we live. So that's why I thought this would be appropriate. But speak your truth. God bless.
Well, I thank you all so much for this opportunity. How long do I have, John? I just want to make sure I don't
Are you speaking at 14?
I'm going to just show my slides.
Okay, how long is it?
Just 19 slides.
How long do you take?
About 10 minutes.
Fine.
10,
10 to
15 minutes.
15 minutes, no problem.
Okay, so, well, the title of this presentation, I call it a republic if you can keep it. Promoting social justice in Biafra.
Oh, Dr. Aka, can you be just a little bit closer to your mic?
Okay, yeah.
I think it's one on the left, by your right, correct?
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, how do you promote social justice in Biafra? We want to promote social justice in Biafra using an economic bill of rights embedded in an economic democracy act. And this is what we're speaking about, folks. The title of this panel is Building a Better Future for Every Human Person. When we talk about every human person, what do we really mean? Every human person anywhere in the world, because as Dr. King once said, injustice in one place is justice, injustice everywhere. I think I'm paraphrasing him rather than saying word for word what he said. So we have to keep this in mind. Particularly we live in a world that is interconnected. When you have problem in one part of the world, you have it in other parts of the world. Particularly where we are now. We're talking about poverty, we're talking about prejudice, whether you call it racism in the United States or ethnicity in Africa. We're talking about war, conflict. We're also talking about environmental degeneration, degradation, whether we talk about global warming or whatever it is. And this is a map of Biafra. Let's go very quickly. This is the outline of what I'm going to share with you. I have some kind of introduction and argument. In the short history of Biafra, an economic democracy act in Biafra. And what I'm talking about here on behalf of my colleagues is how do we superimpose a Bill of Economic Rights upon the political Bill of Rights that we already have. And we're talking about a selection of 6 interrelated steps to socioeconomic justice in Biafra. And I'm going to wind up. And I want to begin by appreciating each and every one of you, the Center for Economic and Social Justice. And it was Justice University, because that's how we started this whole process that is ending here today. So I warmly welcome every attendee present here in this panel. 3 arguments we're trying to make here. Number 1 is to be sustainable as a separate state, keeping the republic, and going back to our founding father, Benjamin Franklin. Biafra must be a state qualitatively different from Nigeria. It cannot replicate the many ills and dysfunctionalities of Nigeria. And somebody will say, well, you have so many states in Africa already, 55 states. But Africa is a large continent, we want to keep in mind. The 2nd largest continent. So 55 countries. You want to create more. Well, it has to be something different from Nigeria. We can't replicate the problems we have now. So the key and secret to that sustainability is social justice. And social justice within the just way paradigm, which goes beyond the constraints and inadequacies of capitalism and socialism. Number 3, what the diagnosis that I just gave you means is that we need an economic bill of rights. Superimpose conventional, I call it pedestrian, if you may, political democracy doesn't take us too far. We're going to achieve that through 6 interrelated steps. Number 1, pursuit of socioeconomic justice. Number 2, an economic policy embedded in the 4 pillars of an economically just society. Number 3, you have to invest in a citizens' land development cooperative of the kind we see in Missouri, where Jim Gordon is coming from. Number 4, we have to create a strong monetary system. Our guru, Nam Holland, has been singing this like a sing song for us. We need a strong monetary system, controlled by the people rather than politicians. You had Michael Graney telling us, and I learned so much from this presentation, the original idea being that we should control this process. We do not, unfortunately. And then apply the doctrine of binary economics. Number 6, that's number 5. Number 6, ownership through an economic stock, employee stock ownership plan, ESOP, that goes beyond retirement. Because where we are now, we just stop at retirement. We've talked about this. The significance of this talk is esteem and trust of a new state anchored in social justice, qualitatively different from present-day Nigeria. We cannot replicate the problems we have in Nigeria already. And my goal here is not an exhaustive analysis. I just want to give you some material that will form the basis for questions and comments that you may have. Let's talk about Biafra here, my brothers and sisters. Biafra emerged as a state in the world stage on May 29, 1967. You saw the video that was shown to you, the 3 major ethnic groups in Biafra. Following a series of compounding crises in quick succession, military coup January 1966. Those of you born in the US, you never experienced a military coup in life. Britain did under Cromwell. So Nigeria has had it. So many. January 66, counter coup in July 66, mass killing of the Igbo in various parts of Nigeria. And this was happening while Britain was still in charge. Nigeria was born in 1914. The third since the creation of the country, the second of which led to the introduction of federalism. Okay? It used to be a centralized country, and Britain said, well, excuse me, if we're going to have peace, they have to kind of do some power pollution. And that's how they introduced federalism in 1954. Mass exodus of Igbo into their homeland in eastern Nigeria. That was 1967. 66, just before the war. And the Fell-Apuri Agreement. And this was in 1967. Some kind of agreement to make sure that the war did not take place, which fortunately still happens. The whole idea was to cool things down, stop the civil war. The human material cost of the resultant civil war from 1967 to 1970, that some people call it genocide. You have 3.5 million Igbo dying during the war. And what did they do? Innocent people. Igbo property worth billions of dollars of US dollars completely destroyed. After the war, the promise, no victor, no vanquish, it didn't take place. Repression continued after the war. Some people said, what is the peace? It becomes, let me get some, clear my throat, excuse me. It becomes a continuation of the war by other means. Yeah, more than 3 million people have died since the end of the Biafra War. This is supposed to be in peacetime. Yeah, because of these repressions, Igbo and other Biafrans effectively excluded from the mainstream of the Nigerian political and economic lives. What they have done is, we need our own separate state, which is why we are here. This struggle for self-determination has set its fever pitch under the Fourth Republic since 1999. The way Nigeria goes is each period, when you don't have the military being in charge, they call it a republic. And this idea comes from the French people. So we have what they call the Fourth Republic, going back to 1999. Now I think that the Biafrans are at an important juncture in their campaign for independence. And this is two reasons why I say that. You notice, you follow events in the world. Queen Elizabeth died in September 2022, and for so long, they have wanted Nigeria to remain the way it is. The question was, how many Biafrans do you need in order for us to keep Nigeria alive? This is sadist. You don't believe that human beings could treat fellow human beings like this, especially when you think that Britain is willing to let some people go. The Scottish, for example, they're giving them opportunity to have a referendum to see whether they want to stay with Britain or stay on their own. And there's something also important that is happening this year. Military rule is coming to an end. Because the so-called Fourth Republic, in my view, is military rule. You have two generals who have been in charge, General Olusegun Obasanjo and the one that very repressive, Muhammadu Buhari. Between them, look at the 23 years they have taken up 16 years of the 23 years. So you ask the question, what remains? The next segment in my discussion here is superimposing a bill of economic rights upon the political bill of rights. And my argument here essentially is political freedom remains incomplete unless it is backed by economic freedom signified by an economic bill of rights. The US Constitution and many other constitutions miss out. We have President Franklin D. Roosevelt saying to Congress in January 1944, necessitous men are not free men. Little wonder that the law and economics scholar, you hear us talk about Louis Kelsey, that's what we have learned from this school as the CESJ, that's what have taught us all of this. He wrote a 1957 article where he criticized Karl Marx for failing to understand, to see the underlying political significance of property. And we find these rights, these guarantees, finally finding their way into the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948, right after the Civil War, as Dr. Coleman told you. An International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, 1966. By the way, the U.S. refused to sign this into law, to make this part of U.S. law. Jimmy Carter has been pleading for this, and it did not happen. They talked about the right to food, shelter, decent housing, education, job, and affordable health care. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is particularly impressive because of something that it did. The right to private property under its Article 17. It says everyone has the right to own property, alone as well as in association with others. That no one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his or her property. So keep in mind this is a declaration. The standard that we could use it's not obligatory. You notice that the U.S. does not apply. History and provisions of Economic Democracy Act and the factors that make it attractive as a capital ownership tool. I'm not going to go into that because that's all we've been discussing today. Previous speakers also have talked about this. Now, what about the other element that I want to discuss? The multiple benefits of the Bill of Biafrans fighting to create a new society free from the socioeconomic insecurities of Nigeria. This is almost self-evident, my friend. As Fuller, or Mr. Fuller, thought, to change something, we're better off building a new model that makes the existing model obsolete rather than fighting existing reality. And for us, Biafrans, as well as for Americans, ordinary Americans, the EDA needs this prescription. Now, three cautionaries I want to share with you before I move further. The steps I'm going to discuss with you very, very quickly, they're all connected, they're interlinked, they're not mutually exclusive. Number two, they are illustrative rather than exhaust all possibilities. We can talk a little more. For best results, we must implement them simultaneously. We cannot do it sequentially. Number one, pursuit of socioeconomic justice. And I said a considerable way to go is the principles of economic justice according to Louis Kelso and Mortimer Adler. We learned quite a bit about their idea, very brilliant idea. The notion of an ideal market system based on three interdependent principles: participation, distribution, and limitation. Participation means that you have to have access to the means of acquiring and possessing property. It's a matter of social justice. Everybody has to have it. Distribution says you have to distribute property rights based on an individual's contribution to production, whether labor, capital, or both. And then limitation, which is known as a harmony principle for them, is an anti-greed mechanism that puts a check on abuses of property, such as monopolistic accumulations of capital. Number two, an economic policy embedded in the four pillars of an economically just society. Look at the four there. Again, we're drawing from Kelso and Adler, the theory of economic justice. They are the tools for creating and maintaining a more just economy, as well as for transforming unjust economies. Look at the four. Expanded ownership of productive assets. Give every worker an ownership stake in income-producing property, consistent with Article 17 of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. Number two, limited economic power of the states. How do you do that? Policing abuses within the private sector, lifting barriers to equal ownership opportunity, creating a stable currency, ending economic monopolies and elected special privilege, providing social safety nets for human emergencies, protecting the environment. Number three, restoring free and open markets. How do you do this? Decentralize economic choice and empower each person as a consumer, as a worker, and as an owner. And then number four, restoring private property. How do you do this? Reform laws that prohibit or inhibit acquisition and possession of private property. Number three, and Jim Gordon knows a lot about this, and we have a senator who just left. Investment on the Citizens Land Development Corporation. They said the model here, the essential model is usually state. The CLDC is a for-profit, professionally managed, citizen-owned and governed community land planning and development enterprise, designed to enable every citizen of the community with reckonable size to acquire a direct ownership stake in local land, natural resources, and basic infrastructure. For us in Biafra, number one thing we're going to do is we're going to replace the unjust land use decree in Nigeria. This was adopted in 1978 under military rule. Then you have the Nigerian 1979 and 1999 Constitution integrating this provision. What it does is nationalize land. Whatever wealth that is in that land, we have to change this. This must be changed. Number 4, you create a strong monetary system controlled by the people. In a land, again, by the people, you said, Mike, about the intense change from what original idea was of the central bank or commercial bank, the things we are supposed to do. And I said a strong monetary system is a direction for expanding credit and ownership. You have to have it and building a just market economy. Control over money and credit in the form of financial capital determines who will own land and control productive capital in the future. Therefore, to facilitate expanded access to capital credit and productive assets, how money is created and extended should be within the control of the people, not politicians, my friend. The current system favors the rich and disadvantages the poor collateral asset that they need in order for them to get bank credit. And it is dependent on past savings that folks like me and you we do not have. So again, that gives a lot of advantage to those who are already doing well in the present system. An important element here, my friends, is the distinction between consumer credit and capital credit. Capital credit is procreative, which means it's self-liquidating. Money comes. Consumer credit does not generate its own repayment. Applying the doctrine of binary economics, binary means two. And here again, we're going, you can see how influential Kelso and others have been, and Adler have been here now theoretically, but also in a very practical way. They are teaching us that labor and productive capital ownership are the two real ways of earning a living. Now, this is the snap that we're faced with. While humans usually own their labor, that is not necessarily the case with capital. Binary economics embeds the belief that society has a duty to ensure that all humans have good health, housing, education, and independent income made possible by interest-free loans, as well as a responsibility to protect the environment for its sake. In the view of binary economics, capital, which Kelso defined as any human contribution to the production of marketable goods and services, including land, machine and tools management system, and patents, does not enhance labor's ability to produce economic goods. Instead, it makes many forms of labor unnecessary. Number 6, last but not the least, ownership through an employee stock ownership plan, ESOP, that goes beyond retirement. What are ESOPs? An ownership expanding technique that gives workers in a corporation credit interest in the corporation they want, as well as a voice in corporate government. That's the key here, fellows. An ESOP loan is based on a particular company's credit with repayment expected wholly out of future profits of the company. That's the key. Not what you save now, but for the future. It was invented by Louis Kelso in 1974. Today limited mostly, only actually, to retirement in corporate entities. Now the challenge Biafrans face, which they will gladly tackle, will be how to extend this wealth-creating technique beyond retirement and the corporate business setting. And then finally, before you cut me off, ask earnestly for justice and it will be given to you. This is what the Bible says. Just ask. In the light of this biblical wisdom, prospects for the future depends on what we make use of the opportunity presented to us right now. Because of the urgency of now that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. talked about, the future we crave is now rather than later. Now, the challenge Biafran leaders, fellows like my dear brothers here, and their counterparts in other societies, faces how to equip citizens with analytical, critical, and creative skills that we need to meet the demands of the 21st century workplace. and to earn an independent and dignified. The key element here, fellows, is dignified. As long as I tells us, you could decide what you want to do with your time, whether you want to teach for $1 a year. In the face, this kind of dignified living where you can do practically whatever you want to do with your time. In the face of automation, robotics, artificial intelligence, and global competition. The way to that future is extended ownership, whether it's just third way paradigm outside the constraints and limitations of capitalism and socialism. So, you own or you leave.
Is the Bluebird part of your set? Does he have a name?
I like the guy. That's the way I get my presentation.
Well, it's good because everybody will remember that it's the Bluebird guy. You know, I listened to his whole talk and I had a laugh. Thank you. But it's serious, the Bluebird of ownership. Okay. We have, do we go with Dawn next? I'm sorry. I'm sorry, we took the third, we cut it off to do something. We started with the fourth. Should we go without a break and just go through questions? All right, why don't we do questions and answers for the couple people, Michael and Sir?
How many of your countrymen are in exile?
Yes, how many of your countrymen are in exile around the world? So how many of your countrymen are in exile? How many Biafrans are in exile?
Okay, my name is Reverend Dr. Felix Olise. That's a very good question. And I'm going to answer it and put more juice to it. But my colleague now, you guys know why he doesn't have hair in his head. He lost all of them reading. Now, it's millions. I want everybody to please make note of this, please, and also let the media know this. When you hear Nigerians in America and diaspora, there are so many ethnic groups. The major ethnic groups is the Fulani Hausa. Fulanis are the Muslims that are killing us. Totally. Brochure you have, look at the middle, and then a note and tell people it's not for everybody. That is happening right now, I'm speaking. And you see me around this end, you go take that phone. That's people that are being killed as we are here in this hall. They're calling me. I run the medical unit that takes care of people they are killing. I do it in telehealth. There are millions. When you hear Nigerians in diaspora doing well, doing better than any other immigrants, they are not Nigerians. They are Igbos. We have been killed and Europe and the South. Go to map of Nigeria, you see River, Benue, River Niger, as you look at it. The north is the Fulani Muslim, middle belt is mainly Hausans, southwest is Yoruba, southeast is Daf that was killed. The pictures you see in black and white are what happened in 1967 to 1970. Precisely July of 6th, they fired the first shock, to 15th of January, then it ended. I was there 10 years in the bunker, in the bush. My number is B80845.
Reverend Doctor, I don't mean to shut you off, but we have a section for you. We're into Q&A. You gave an answer of millions of different. Are there other questions? Yes, Marilyn.
Can I get a copy of your slides?
Yes,
Okay.
I'll leave my email address in the
yes, you would.
She is running for mayor. She's also a senator, a state senator, in charge of bond commission. So this is a good message. She has stuck around. Thank you. Someone else. Another Q&A. How about for Michael? Does anybody remember that Michael talked the second time? Okay. All right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, we're gonna, you have
Oh.
to state? I'll be sure.
Oh, I have a question.
Oh, come on, stand up. Ma'am?
I have a question for Michael.
Yes.
I just want to say that you're a very intelligent man, and thank you for educating us. And I wanted to know, how can us as Black people and people in general build our credit in order to get to that point where we can own things and be independent in this world, I guess you could say.
I'm glad you said that because I left it out. The thing is, what prevents people from using the system that I described of future savings is called credit worthiness. How do you become credit worthy? Well, you've heard the expression, it takes money to make money.
Yes.
That means you're credit worthy. What we do is we substitute for collateral, which is what you need, the money that you need to make money. We would substitute capital credit insurance and reinsurance. In other words, instead of having the collateral, rent the collateral, if that makes sense to you. And rather than take immediate possession of these shares and the new capital that you're buying, we put it in a special trust so that you can't touch it until it's fully paid for. After that, you can do with it what you want. But as long as it's being paid for and is covered by the insurance so that you're credit worthy, you can't touch it. Once it's paid for, it's yours. But while it's being paid for, it's protected.
So is it smart to do IRAs and CDs and things like that into the banks and things like that?
Well,
Actually, what he's saying, I was in the insurance business. An actuary, that's the guy who's taken a lot of math courses and been tested on his knowledge of all of that stuff, can figure out what the risk is of people defaulting.
Yes.
Auto insurance. Do you have no accidents? Do you get a better rate or a worse rate than if you have a lot of accidents? You get a better rate, yeah. So we can figure out with an actuary what the cost of this type of insurance on the future might be. And if everybody's paying a premium, then the system gets balanced. And this is from listening a couple times. You're getting to listen once, but it means I gotta go and do some more work. But there are methods, there were ways that Norm said to me when I first met him. He said, "Oh, insurance, well that's something, you see, there's an opportunity here for somebody in the marketplace." Who had a hand up? Yes, sir. You.
yes. Well, let me just say one very quick thing. What we do is we change the credit worthiness from the individual to the investment.
Thank you for answering my question.
I guess I'm trying to understand if we're talking here today about ownership, passive ownership or full ownership. Because today's conversation, I'm not hearing the words risk, management, liabilities, the things that go along with the management that I know about, where you actually, as an owner, you're taking chances. You're having to take on a lot of risk. You're having to stay up at night worrying about these assets that you own. That's a different thing than passive management, where you just get a legal ownership over something with some benefits that I guess somebody else has to manage. So I'd like to see if we could clarify what ownership really means.
Yeah, well, first of all, we're talking about, first of all, you're talking about corporations in need of new capital each year, which are in the trillions. You divide it by the population, and you get something like, what do we have? 16,000 now, but we use figures of 10,000. Now, how many years does it take to pay off the cost of capital? And it's anywhere between 4 and 7 years. Now, some shares in corporations are quicker. Another thing that we correct is
that back in 1990, Henry Ford did not pay out all the profits on the shares owned by his shareholders. And Dodge.
Norm, if you can you just hold the mic a little closer here, brother?
And Dodge.
There you go.
And Dodge said, Henry, we have private property. And you can't deprive the owner of private property. But Henry Ford wanted to use all their profits to finance the growth. So there was a case, Ford versus Dodge and Cousins. And unfortunately, for the sake of history all over the world, corporations, Henry Ford won, and corporations all over the world don't have to pay out their shares. Under the Economic Democracy Act, they would have to, because we would change the tax laws that corporations would get a deduction for paying out their profits, so there'd be no corporate taxes. All taxes would be individual taxation, and we would have an exemption for people who are below a particular income. I forget what the amount was right now. Would not have to pay anything. Now, yes, I do remember now that $30,000 for a husband, $30,000 for the wife, and $10,000 for each of the children. So that a family of four would not have to pay a penny in federal income taxes unless they had over $100,000 of income. But in the meantime, we're saying their income could be increased not only through jobs, but also through ownership. So that by the age of 18, a child born today would have $18,000 of income from ownership. By the time they reach Social Security age, 65, 64, 65, they would be getting $88,000. We're on Social Security. This is twice as much, more than twice as much as you get under Social Security under the economic democracy.
Am I right that the numbers that would bear out your statement are on the QR code? They're because I've seen your numbers put together, but I am as your moderator, I'm trying to say
That was not germane to this question.
His question is, is there?
I think I can answer very quickly.
all right, but we need a quick answer. Thank you. Very quick.
With 800 properties.
Why is it so hard for black people to get along?
It was on the east side. That was a black owned bank. Didn't last.
That's ownership, and that's a very different kind of economy than what you just described, where people have
And all I was trying to do was hold our mayor's feet to the fire to get some data to the voters. That's exactly what I was doing. I've mentioned it twice today, but he doesn't answer that, okay? Here was a chance for me to ask the question in line with, it is capital property, yes? It's owned by all of us who live in Bridgeport, and we can't even get data on it, much less a return on it. Okay, but it is capital, it's not this other third way. You're right, okay?
To answer the question, in minority economics, there is no distinction between ownership of labor and ownership of capital per se. You are entitled to the full fruits of your labor, and you are entitled to the full fruits of your capital. Now, what you're risking is your ownership. If you own $100,000 worth of capital, you risk losing that entire $100,000. Now, you may pay somebody to manage it, but the risk is still yours.
Yes.
The same way that you risk your labor in performing, you use up your labor, you use up your personal physical resources. When you own capital, you're risking your ownership, you're risking your financial resources. It's the same. same thing. So you can't say that you're not risking anything. This whole passive versus active ownership is something for tax code. It doesn't really apply in binary economics.
And gentlemen, when you speak into the mic, can you please hold it quicker because the sound guy back there, if it's low, it's hard for him to hear for the broadcast.
Okay, I need guidance from you. Dawn, where do we go?
Okay, just a quick comment before Gene is going to give a little bit more answer. So we look at ownership as in two ways. One are the legal rights, the property rights. The other is the psychological commitment that someone has in terms of the thing that they own. But that's not always the case. You may have someone who's in a coma who still owns property. So we got to recognize, as Kelsey does, they're two interdependent but separate factors of production. What you're mentioning is absolutely right. You have abandoned properties that are just sitting there decaying. You're going to need labor, you're going to need management, you're going to need financing, many different things. The shareholder doesn't necessarily have to be a good manager. In fact, that's rarely the case. So we are looking at the structuring of corporations so that decisions are made properly with accountability and transparency to the owners. So if we were to say what is passive, what may occur to people as just being receiving dividends may actually be someone exercising their oversight of their investments and being able to sell their investments if they feel that it's not being managed properly. So that's part of what we would, how we respond to your question, but it's one that we often get.
And this is also a challenge for the university world, to begin teaching people what they don't understand about property, ownership, and responsibility.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, all right. I just want to respond to her one question or answer. You were talking about credit. The Latin word for credit is leaf, paper. But I want to encourage everybody, we have to get out of using credit for consumption.
Yes.
Use credit for investment,
Exactly.
not in consumption. That's something we have to do. Financial literacy is great. And as I was telling you earlier, how can you be liberated by a system when you don't understand it? You have to understand the system. And one system is the monetary system. That's an institution that is not questioned on the creation of money, the policy in which it is governed. We don't even question it. It's taken for granted. We have got to learn money is being created out of nothing. It's legal counterfeit. If you and I got a machine and start printing money, we'll go to jail for it. It's illegal for us to do it, but it's legal for governments to do it.
Exactly.
And we have got to educate the community on it. The time is right now for the economic democracy act, because politicians and government, I don't know what they think. We have to get the Federal Reserve to stop listening to politicians when creating money. They got to begin to listen to people. They gave us the right to vote.
Yes.
They gave us equal access to the ballot box, but they didn't give us equal access to ownership of capital, economic democracy. And you would never have a political democracy unless you have an economic democracy.
Yes,
Lastly, if you look at the founders of this country, when I talk about the 413 million acres of land, the founders of this country understood that. They built an economic democracy before political democracy. Today, governments, and all respect to any legislators, politicians and governments are supposed to be of the people, for the people, by the people. Today, there are other corporations, for corporations, and bought by corporations. And the reason for that is that it's the corporations that have all the economic power. So under the Economic Democracy Act, gives power, economic power to the citizens and the people, then that forces government to serve the citizens of the United States and not the corporations.
Oh, that's right.
But I think I was out of the room, and I'm gonna make a statement. Somebody mentioned something about reparation, and I wish I was you. But reparation, the root word of reparation is repair. Repair the money system. If they were all the descendants of American slaves that check tomorrow, Nike will be rich. It doesn't make sense. Let's repair the system, and my thought is, you can't put a dollar value on the atrocity of slavery. You can't put a dollar value on that. I mean, the burning, the lynching, the murdering, the rapists, everything. You can't put a dollar on that. And especially a dollar that has no value. You can't do it. You can't do it. So what we're asking for is to repair the system. Repair the monetary system, where we can build generational wealth. Slavery lasted for 256 years, chattel slavery, 100 years of Jim Crow. Jim Crow still exists today. This is Jim Crow
Yes.
2.0.
I know that's right.
It still
Yes.
exists. And there's more slavery today than ever before.
Yes.
As Harriet Tubman said, I could have freed 1,000 if they only knew there were slaves. We got wage slaves, welfare slaves, charity slaves. We're enslaved. All we're doing is sharecropping. We have to get capital ownership. Don't write me no check. Give me some ownership of the new advanced technology, artificial intelligence, robots that are going to replace 90% of the job. What are we going to do? AI already replaced some of the HR, human resource, unemployment office. That's artificial intelligence.
That's true.
To keep it simple, is that under the Economic Democracy Act, we're asking for equal access to capital ownership without taking anything from the existing owner. That's all we're asking. Is give us equal access. I don't want no check. Give me a chance to build generational wealth. Absolutely. And this is the time now. In closing, the Federal Reserve has taken on the role of addressing wealth and income inequality. We just gotta get at the table. The Federal Reserve Act is about full employment. Everybody talks about full employment. Well, if jobs are gonna be replaced, then what are they gonna be saying? Zero employment. See, robots and all that, they consume electricity. That's it. Humans, if you lower the income to humans, then where's the demand? You're not gonna get, huh? Yeah, and that's what, another thing is
That's
that
true.
the big tech firms in Silicon Valley, they come up with universal basic income. You know why? Because they know more than you do. They know that robots is going to replace your job. But then you're talking about $1,000, $2,000 a month. Now you want to control my standard of living. Then you want to take away my dignity of work. It's not sustainable. Yeah, there's programs out here, but it's not sustainable. Get with TSJ, DOS-BSJ, and let's go out here and build something for our children's children. Thank you.
We're flowing through our 2 o'clock break. So if this audience is familiar enough to give a break when John is taking up our next period.
Thank you, everyone, for your patience.
I didn't see it.